breaking news. Germany upgrades future warfare after the Ukraine war. It is February 1st, 2026, and we are witnessing a seismic shift in European defense strategy. In a move that has absolutely stunned the legacy defense industry, the German government has abruptly canceled a massive 600 million euro future warfare project known as the MAUS. And the reason? The brutal, transparent reality of the war in Ukraine has rendered this technology obsolete before it was even built. If you care about the security of Europe and, the incredible rapid-fire innovations coming out of the Ukrainian defense forces, you need to stay ahead of the curve. So before we get started, please go ahead and subscribe to Defense Reports. It is your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. You do not want to miss what is coming next. I am Alex, joining with Aria in the latest podcast by Defense Report for a sharp, no-nonsense breakdown of the latest in global defense news, military technology, and strategic developments. And today we are going to cover the death of the MAUS project, the radio scandal that absolutely shook the Bundeswehr, and the rise of the crow that might just replace it.
It is a fascinating story. It really gets to the heart of how modern warfare is changing faster than bureaucracies can even sign the checks.
Right.
And honestly, it's about time someone in Berlin looked at the hard data coming out of Ukraine and actually, they acted on it.
Absolutely. And we have got some serious cliffhangers to unpack today. This isn't just about a canceled truck contract. We need to figure out why a standard procurement project turned into a political scandal involving accusations of betrayal at the Ministry of Defense.
Betrayal, I mean.
What kind of mess requires that strong of a word?
We're also going to look at the tactical shift. How did Ukrainian drone operators, with their ingenuity, fundamentally change the math for German generals? We are talking about a total rewrite of the rule book on survivability.
Plus, we have a bit of historical irony to chew on. As a history buff, I couldn't help but notice this is not the first time Germany tried to build a mouse that was too heavy, too ambitious, and ultimately a logistical nightmare.
That is right. But our mission for this deep dive is to clarify that this is really about the transparent battlefield. It's about how militaries, specifically in Europe, are scrambling to adapt to a world where if you can be seen, you can be killed.
And right now, Ukraine is the one teaching the rest of the world how to see.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to start with the hard news because the numbers here are just staggering. What exactly happened this week in the Bundestag?
So on January 28th, 2026, just a few days ago, the Budget Committee of the German Bundestag officially rejected the purchase of up to 90 MAUS systems.
MAUS.
That stands for Mobiles Aufklärungsunterstützungssystem.
Which is a mouthful, even for German standards. I know the acronym translates to mouse, but for the layman, what are we actually looking at here? Paint a picture for us.
Don't let the cute name fool you. This isn't a small piece of kit. It was intended to be the successor to the Hummel, or bumblebee jammer. The plan was to take a highly sophisticated electronic warfare suite, capable of listening to enemy signals and jamming them, and mounted on a MOAG Piranha V.
And the Piranha V isn't exactly a Jeep.
Oh, far from it. It's a massive 8-wheeled armored fighting vehicle. It's about 8 meters long, weighs around 30 tons. Imagine a localized tank on wheels, but instead of a cannon, it has a 15-meter extendable mast on top for electronic warfare.
30 tons. Okay, so this is a heavy beast. And the price tag matched the weight.
Oh, it matched it all right. We are talking about 596 million euros just for the first phase.
The first phase.
That was only for 40 systems and 2 prototypes.
That is nearly 600 million euros on the table. That's roughly 15 million euros per vehicle. And the government just said no.
Just said no.
Now, usually when these things get canceled, it's because of budget cuts or austerity, but that's not what happened here, is it?
No, and that is what makes this so significant. They explicitly cited lessons learned from the war in Ukraine. Lawmaker Andreas Schwartz, who sits on the Budget Committee, didn't mince words. He called the entire concept outdated.
Outdated is a heavy word for a project that was supposed to be state-of-the-art. What specific lesson from Ukraine killed this thing?
It comes down to armor versus reality. The Piranha V has what we call STANAG Level 4 armor.
Break that down for us. What does Level 4 actually stop?
In the context of the last 20 years, fighting in Afghanistan or Mali, it's excellent. It stops heavy machine gun fire. It stops artillery splinters. It keeps the crew safe from small arms. But the battlefield in Ukraine has proven that the physics has changed. STANAG Level 4 might as well be cardboard when you're facing an FPV drone carrying a shaped charge warhead.
Right, because those drones aren't just spraying bullets. They're specifically designed to punch through armor.
Exactly. A shaped charge focuses all its explosive energy into a tiny, tiny point. It just burns right through that armor. And remember, the MAUS has a giant mast sticking 15 meters into the air.
It's not exactly subtle.
It's a billboard. And that brings us to the core tactical problem. We need to talk about the transparent battlefield.
I keep seeing this term in reports coming out of Kyiv. It sounds like sci-fi, but it's very real. How does this concept apply to a vehicle like the MAUS?
Think of it this way. During the Cold War, or even in asymmetric conflicts, electronic warfare was a game of cat and mouse, pun intended. You could drive a jammer up near the front, blast out some jamming noise to disrupt the enemy radios, and then drive away before they could really pinpoint you.
Like shouting in a library and running out the back door before the librarian can figure out which aisle you were in.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
But in Ukraine, the library has high-definition 4K cameras in every aisle, motion sensors on the floor, and the librarian has a sniper rifle trained on the door.
That is a terrifying image.
It is the reality. Being an electronic warfare vehicle today is like turning on a massive spotlight in a dark forest. You are broadcasting high-energy signals. We call it the lighthouse problem.
Right.
As soon as you transmit to jam the enemy, their signal intelligence sensors triangulate your position immediately.
So the very act of doing your job jamming is what gets you killed.
Precisely. In Ukraine, the kill zone, the area where you can be reliably destroyed, now extends about 25 miles or 40 kilometers behind the front line.
40 kilometers, that's not the front line anymore. That's the rear echelon.
No, there is no rear echelon anymore. That's the point. And the time to kill, the duration between when you were detected and when an artillery shell or a drone swarm hits you, is now measured in minutes.
Minutes.
Sometimes seconds.
So if I'm understanding the German logic here, why spend 600 million euros on a vehicle that has to sit 5 kilometers from the front to work when it's just going to be detected instantly and blown up in 5 minutes?
That is the calculation. It becomes a high-value target. If you are a Russian drone operator and you see a standard truck, maybe you ignore it. If you see a 30-ton, 15 million euro electronic warfare system,
that's priority number one.
That becomes priority number one. And there is another specific vulnerability that Ukraine highlighted regarding wheeled vehicles.
Right. The Piranha V is an 8x8 wheeled vehicle. I remember reading reports about pedal mines in Ukraine causing havoc for wheels.
Yes, the PFM-1 mines. They are tiny plastic mines that are scattered by rockets or drones. They're very hard to see. A track vehicle, like a tank, might crush them and keep moving because the tracks are heavy and durable. But a wheeled vehicle, it hits one, pops a tire, and the central inflation system can't keep up. You get immobilized.
And in the kill zone, immobilized means dead.
Correct. Once you stop moving, the artillery dials in. So Germany realized you can't put a lightly armored, expensive box on the front line anymore. You need standoff range, meaning you jam from further away, or you need to distribute the system so it's not all in one basket.
So tactically, the vehicle is a death trap. But even if it wasn't, there's a reason the checkbook stayed closed. And that reason sits inside the dashboard of the vehicle, the radio.
Ah, yes.
This brings us to the radio scandal. I love a good procurement drama, and this one sounds messy.
Messy is putting it lightly. It was a disaster. To understand why the MAUS was canceled, you have to look at the prime contractor, Rohde & Schwarz. They're a massive German electronics firm, very well respected usually, but they were also the lead on a project called DLBO.
DLBO. Catchy. Sound like a sci-fi droid.
It stands for Digitalization of Land-Based Operations. Basically, the German army is trying to replace its ancient analog radios, some from the 1980s, with new digital ones. The project was using the VR500 radio from Rohde & Schwarz.
Replacing radios sounds simple enough. I can go to an electronics store and buy a walkie-talkie in 5 minutes. Why is this so hard?
Because they tried to over-engineer it. We referred to it as the Munster disaster of May 2025.
Ominous name. What happened at Munster?
They held field trials at the Munster training ground. Real soldiers, real vehicles, simulated combat conditions, and everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
Oh.
Let's start with the software. The user interface was apparently designed by people who had never been outside an office. It was so complex, with so many submenus and touch interactions, that soldiers literally couldn't open a radio channel under stress.
Wait, really? So you have bullets, flying simulated bullets, and a soldier is frantically tapping through a menu like they're trying to set up a Bluetooth printer.
Exactly. Imagine wearing tactical gloves, being covered in mud, your heart rate is 160, and you have to navigate a nested menu just to call for fire support.
Yeah.
It was unusable.
That is a nightmare. But software can be patched. Was the hardware any better?
Worse. The radios were physically too big. They ran incredibly hot to the point of overheating in the vehicle cabin. And they drew so much power, they drained the vehicle batteries.
Yeah.
But the kicker was the installation. They didn't fit. The Bundeswehr has about 200 different types of vehicles. These radios required what the Army called open-heart surgery on the vehicles just to install them.
Oh, no.
They had to cut into the chassis, rewire the power, move other equipment. Out of those 200 vehicle types, only about 30 could actually fit the new radios successfully.
That is incompetence on a massive scale. So fast forward to this week. The Ministry of Defense wants to give the same company another 600 million euros for the MAUS project.
Exactly. And the Budget Committee said, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Defense Minister Pistorius reportedly felt betrayed.
Betrayed. That's a very personal word for politics.
It is. But he had been told by the procurement office and the contractor that everything was on schedule. He was assuring the public that the digitalization was working.
Right.
Meanwhile, internal reports were screaming that the radios were failing. So when the MAUS contract came up, which relies heavily on Rohde and Schwarz technology, the trust was just gone.
That makes perfect sense. It's a powerful lesson in accountability. The German government is finally asserting power over the military-industrial complex. But it leaves a gap, right? If the big jamming truck is dead, what replaces it?
Well, this is where the story pivots from bureaucratic failure to future innovation. The industry is pivoting toward what we call a system of systems.
Which sounds like buzzword bingo, but I know you're going to make it make sense. This is where the crow comes in.
Yes. Industry experts are now looking closely at a system called Terra VS, developed by Hensoldt. The name is a mix of Terra, meaning earth, and Corvus, meaning crow.
Why a crow? Is it because they're annoying and loud?
Actually, the crow is the traditional symbol of electronic warfare in many military circles. Crows are incredibly smart, they adapt quickly, they work in groups, and yes, they make a lot of noise.
Okay.
Terra VS isn't a single vehicle, it is a networked suite. And the secret sauce is artificial intelligence and predictive jamming.
Predictive jamming, that sounds like Minority Report. How does a jammer predict the future?
It's all about pattern recognition. Old jammers would hear a signal on frequency A and then blast noise on frequency A. But by the time they start blasting, a modern enemy radio has already hopped to frequency B.
So you're always chasing the tail.
Right. But AI changes that. It listens to the enemy radio hopping from A to B to C. It analyzes the algorithm the enemy is using. It learns the sequence. So instead of chasing the signal, it starts jamming frequency D before the enemy even switches to it.
That is incredible. It's like playing chess where you move your piece to the square your opponent is about to land on.
Exactly. It drastically shortens the ODO loop observe, orient, decide, act. And crucially, Terra VS is software-defined and modular. This aligns with what the U.S. Army is doing with their Modular Mission Payload, or MMP.
I've heard of that. That's the robot dog concept, right?
That's one application. The U.S. philosophy, and what Ukraine is proving works, is that you shouldn't build a jamming tank. You shouldn't build a dedicated vehicle that does nothing else. You should build a jamming kit.
A kit, so a box you can carry.
A box using commercial off-the-shelf technology.
Yeah.
You can strap it to a truck. You can strap it to a drone. You can strap it to a robot dog. If the robot dog walks into a minefield and blows up, you've lost a piece of hardware worth maybe $50,000.
Instead of a 15 million euro Piranha V with a crew of 3 humans inside.
Precisely. And it offers agility. If a new Russian radio frequency pops up in Ukraine on Monday, you can update the software over the weekend and deploy it on Monday. With a bespoke vehicle like the MAUS, upgrading the hardware to hit a new frequency range could take 2 years of dry dock time.
This agility seems to be the key lesson Ukraine is teaching the world. You have to move at the speed of software, not the speed of heavy industry.
That is the Zeitenwende challenge.
Right, the Zeitenwende. For our listeners, that was the 100 billion euro special fund Germany announced to modernize its military after the invasion of Ukraine. But we keep hearing it's struggling.
Well, inflation is eating a lot of the fund. The real purchasing power is down to about 87 billion. But the bigger struggle is against the culture of bureaucracy. Germany is realizing that it takes them decades to procure what Ukraine innovates in weeks.
It is a clash of cultures, peacetime perfectionism versus wartime necessity.
And that brings us to your historical irony. I know you've been dying to make this comparison.
I really have. because you can't make this stuff up. The project was called MAUS. For anyone who knows their World War II history, that name carries a lot of baggage.
You're talking about the Panzer VIII.
The Panzer VIII Maus. It was a project personally approved by Hitler. It was the heaviest tank ever built. It weighed 188 tons.
Just for context, a modern Leopard 2 tank weighs about 65 tons, so this was 3 times the size.
Exactly. It was a monster. Thickest armor ever seen, biggest gun. But it was a complete failure. It was so heavy it couldn't cross bridges, it would crush them. It guzzled fuel at an insane rate. It broke down constantly.
It was the epitome of the wonder weapon mentality, trying to build one giant invincible thing instead of many effective mobile things.
And here we are, almost a century later, and Germany almost made the same mistake twice. They tried to build a mouse truck that was too big, too expensive, and tactically inflexible for the reality of the mud and drones in Ukraine.
But here is the positive spin, and I think this is important for our listeners who support European security. The fact that they canceled it is actually a very good sign.
How so? Usually, cancellations are seen as failures.
Not in defense procurement. Usually, defense programs are like zombies. Once they get funding, they're impossible to kill. The lobbying is too strong, the jobs are too important. The fact that the Bundestag looked at the data from Ukraine, looked at the failure of the radios, and said, stop, it shows that the German system is finally waking up.
They are breaking the sunk cost fallacy.
They are. They are willing to walk away from a bad 600 million euro idea to find a better one. That is actually brave. It shows they are listening to the hard realities of the Ukrainian front.
So, let's summarize what we have learned today. Germany killed the MAUS because the transparent battlefield in Ukraine proves that big, loud electronic targets get destroyed by cheap drones almost instantly.
Right. And that decision was accelerated by a massive breakdown in trust over the previous digital radio scandal. The ministry simply couldn't trust the contractor to deliver working tech after the disaster at Munster.
And the future. The future is AI-driven, modular, and distributed. It is about kits, not trucks. It is about the crow and the system of systems.
It brings us back to the listener. Why does this matter to you? It matters because it shows that in modern warfare, agility and software beat heavy armor and hardware. It's a lesson that applies to everything, not just tanks. If you can't adapt, you lose.
It is a fascinating look at how a war hundreds of kilometers away changes the decisions made in the halls of power in Berlin.
And it raises a really provocative thought for the future, one that I think we should leave our listeners with.
What's that?
If the kill zone really is 40 kilometers deep, and it is controlled by autonomous drones and sensors that never sleep, is the era of any manned armored vehicle near the front line coming to an end?
That is a scary thought. We're talking about the end of the tank concept entirely.
We might be. Are we witnessing the final sunset of the tank and the APC as we know them? If you can be seen, you can be killed. And today, thanks to the innovations we're seeing in Ukraine, everything can be seen.
Something to really think about. You have been listening to Defense Report by Alex and Aria, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please remember to subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.